All right. Welcome to the Reno Ring. Real talk, real trade, real profit. This is the place where we pull back the drywall and look at the framing of real live businesses. All right. We are here with Brian from Premier Renovation Services in Niagara Falls. He does bathroom and kitchen renovations for the past 19 years. And everyone sees the finished kitchen on Instagram, but nobody talks about the absolute chaos of managing crews and the stress of the yo-yo months where you're wondering where the next lead is coming from. Brian has been a home remodeler since 2007 and has actually figured out a way to get the best suppliers, and hint, it's not the big box stores, and become the safety supervisor on a special project that he's going to share with us shortly. So I am your host, the Karen, the girl on fire. I run a suite of business growth companies bridging the gap between old school sales and new school automation. I've been an entrepreneur since age 12, won over a dozen awards and shared stages with Tony Robbins and Jack Canfield. So let's dive in. How did you actually get started in this mess? What inspired you to start your business, Brian?
Well, uh, what happened was I was working for my brother. We were building CNC machinery in Burlington, and I was there for 9 years. And after a while, I just got fed up with the being on the road and being away like 30, 40 times a year in North America, installing machinery and dealing with all kinds of different genres and people and everything like that. And I kind of got worn out, or basically, you know, I don't know, fatigued from it, sort of say. And so I quit, just cold turkey. And I said, what am I going to do? Well, I've always been a hands-on kind of guy, and so um, I actually got a job doing uh, deficiencies for builders. And one of the first I started out was a company called Delridge in Milton, and I started there, and then I branched from there. I ended up hooking up with a company called construction services, which supplied my services that I did to other builders because of them being shorthanded of people. So I started working with Monarch, uh, a big prominent builder here in Ontario. And hence now Monarch is owned by Mattamy, so they're not even existing anymore. They're under the Mattamy umbrella. Anyways, I started with that, and then I was familiar with all the things going on with home building and everything because I was doing all kinds of, PDIs and deficiency stuff and everything. But the biggest thing that I noticed was that, um, builders know how to take your money, but they don't have any accountability. And accountability is very important in this business. You have to be accountable for what you do because it's very easy to spend everybody's money, um, without a doubt. So I learned from that what's really important is the customer. They're the most important, no matter what. And I just decided to go on my own into renovations. No training, no nothing, whatever, cold turkey, jump all in, whatever. And I started out like that. And I was basically, I bought into the system that, I found out that you could get leads for work through trusted pros or home stars, and that's how I really started it, like that. And it was going along
Awesome.
pretty good for a long time, and in 2012, Brian Baumler, who's one of these guys on HDTV, he had a show that he started out with. First was Disaster DIY, and hence his plumber that worked for him. I hired that guy to do all my plumbing, Sam the plumber, because I met him through my landscape guy, who was his wife was cousins to him. And next thing you know, one time, Brian Baumler's architect, Darren Sanger from Creative Structured Creations out of Burlington, calls me up. And this is back in 2000, late 2011 or early 2012, and asked me if I want to bid on a job in Oakville. I said, sure. And he Um, said, "Come to his office. I'll give you drawings." I go, "Okay, this is great." So this was one of my first big rentals. And I went to his office. He gave me 3 sets of drawings, one for me, one for my plumber, one for the electrician. And this house was, at the time, about just a little under $200,000 worth of renovation work. And I said, okay, this is the right way to do it, because when you open up the drawings, you see the picture, exactly what has to be done. There's no second guessing or anything. You can see, what electrical work has to be done, what plumbing work, what tiling work or flooring or kitchen cabinets or whatever, everything that's involved. And at that time, I really wasn't a bathroom modeler. I was everything general, sort of like general. And I said, this is great. Okay. So and I ended up winning the bid. I
Nice.
won the bid based on how I presented the quote, that they told me specifically that nobody presented that quote like I did. I broke the quote down in the categories that had to be broken down. So every floor in that house, which was 3 floors, had demolition, construction, and finishing. And so when I wrote the quote out, I broke it down 3 floors. This was the demolition, the construction, and whatever. And it was very legible and easy to read. And I was able to understand. And there was like 6 or 7 other contractors from, oh yeah, sorry, got a little off track. How they found me was I was on Brian Baumler's contract group. I was paying a fee to be in a directory. And that's how Darren found me. And so he also went in that directory and found a bunch of other guys. And none of those other guys presented the quote the same way I did. None of them. And even Brian thought that was great. He said, this guy kind of seems knows what he's doing. And I really had no training on that. It was just common sense to me. And,
Wow, what a compliment.
and next thing you know, I'm going out to dinner with him and his wife. They wrote
What?
a big letter and give me all these accolades. Oh yeah, you should have seen it. Went to Spencer Smith Mark in Burlington and everything. And I said, okay, this could be good. And then next thing you know, I got stickers and labels and everything that I could post on my truck and my trailer, because I had a contractor's trailer with my name on it. And I swear to God, people used to drive down the road and look into the truck and see if I was Brian, because they saw the Baumler logo. That's how branding can,
Nice.
that's how branding can whatever. And so we started out like that and this and that. And that job started out right, and then hence, 2 years later, we were in litigation because the customer owed me money. So that can be one of the pitfalls of being in this business, is that you can run into some bad sheep, or
100%. On
bad.
both sides, customers
Yes,
and
yes,
rental
yes,
guys.
yes,
Yep,
yes, 100%. And
yep.
that's what ended
So
up
did you
happening. 3 years later
awesome.
3 years later, we set no, 2 years later, we settled because the judge said, "Don't go any farther because of the cost that's gonna be involved to go to court." He said I would win, but for every day in court, me and the client would have to spend $15,000. And to
That's a
me,
lot of money.
we were already $20,000 each at that point, at pretrial.
Gotta cut your losses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically that's what the judge
So did
saying.
you Yeah, absolutely. I hear that. That's definitely one of the risks of the remodel space, is dealing with people who aren't happy with what you do. We'll get into that a little bit more, but did you always know you wanted to run your own business, or did it just like you kind of told your story there, but did you
I
in your
really,
earlier years,
I
did you
really,
think you wanted to own your own business or no?
I did, but I wasn't sure. But I knew what I wanted to do, that I wanted to do something that I could be praised at doing it and doing good work. And at the same token, try and be successful. Right. And
Absolutely.
it's not easy to be your own, to be your own, be an owner of a business. Okay, especially when you know, sort of got to take on responsibility of a lot of things involved, without having other people involved. Um, when I did learn going along, because I always tried to improve and become better, is that I got in front of a bunch of business coaches at one point and said, "How do you create success?" Because I got to tell you, I'm just going to be honest. Working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day is not success to a business. Success is being able to take vacation, spend time with your family, and and be able to have time for yourself without being tied down to everything 24/7, 7 days a week. That's not, that's where the success is. So that, so what I did learn from these business coaches is that, you need to, in order to have that and achieve that, you've got to drive your sales up to the point that, excuse me, that you have, somebody working in the office answering the phones, somebody on the, somebody could be doing sales, somebody could be managing the office, and you yourself, the homeowner, could be out looking for new work and keeping things driving forward to the guys that you have working for you. So that when you do go on vacation, sort of say, I'm using that as an example, that it's still moving forward without you having to be there. That's success. And
That's the dream.
and it's the dream for everybody. And it ain't easy. I can tell you that for a fact. It ain't easy because every client's not going to be the same, for one. Okay. And every job's not going to be the same, and you're going to have, you got to, I don't know. I've always said this. You got to learn how to problem solve. So you always got to have a plan B to plan A and a plan C to plan B and a plan whatever, because you have to know how to control what's going on, right? And some people just can't do that. They don't have. I don't know if it's more the experience or just don't have the patience, right? I think more for me it was that I have patience. I understand where people come from. I always try and solve conflict when I can and not walk away from it and try and be as accountable as I can be as accountable to. And at the same token, if the other side is can be issues, well, we got to hold them accountable too, right? You know what I mean? So, it, look, you're not always going to have perfect clients, but you got. I think you kind of have to. You kind of have to read people and understand them when you first meet them, what you're really going to be up against, because everybody's not the same, right?
You
And
actually told me about that on our pre-call. You said you it was really, really astute, so I'd just like you to repeat that. You were talking about when you first go into a homeowner's home and you size up the situation. Can you tell the guys, I think this is so good, I think this is gold, what
yeah,
you do
yeah,
to assess the kind of person you're dealing with when you first walk into the house. I
yeah,
think that's a really great, insight.
yeah. So what we talked about, Karen, is that I learned from doing PDIs for builders. Okay, dealing with homeowners. What I learned was, first of all, nobody has entitlement. Okay, these people thought they were buying a home. Let's say I'm going to use an example. Can walk in, with a flashlight and levels and all this kind of stuff, and try and make their home look like it was perfect, and then write these things down as or imperfect, and write these things down for deficiencies. It doesn't work that way in the real world. I would sit there and tell them, where are you going with that? You can't. Tyrion doesn't allow that. You're protected under Tyrion, but you have to follow the rules, right? It's like a Bible.
Because tell them that you were about your safety credentials as your safety supervisor role.
Well, I was a safety guy too, because I was part of the safety inside of a construction site, right? A big multi-million-dollar construction site. And one of the things you have to
That's the
understand, that it's a big responsibility, and it's a big responsibility for not just me, but for the supervisors and for the company itself. And under the rules of engagement in Ontario, under building code with the Department of Labor or whatever, there's safety rules you have to follow. So, homeowners can't be walking onto construction sites because they're not allowed. It's just plain blank and simple. You're not allowed to be there, right? And there's lots of
'Cause if
times.
something happens,
Yes, if
like,
something
something could
happens,
happen.
somebody happens to die or something because we didn't know they were there. Guess what's going to happen? They'll be shut down the construction site. There'll be police involved. Because it becomes a fatality, and and then it becomes just an investigation, and it could be months before it's resolved, right? And so I've had to stop when I was working for the builder. Lots of times I had to stop people from going into their homes, right? The only time they were allowed to go in is if they came with me when they were doing PDI, which is because the house was finished, right? So
Right. You remember we were talking about how to assess the customer when you first go into the house.
yeah,
I got you
so
off track there,
my
sorry.
clients today, when I'm working, because of that, what I experiences I had, what I do is what's really important is that when you walk up to the door and you first meet the clients and you shake their hand and you introduce yourself, right? You kind of judge looking at the person itself and the body language of what you might be possibly dealing with. Okay. And that's when I come back and say, not
Like
everybody's,
what? Like, give an example. What would be the different kinds of things you'd
well,
encounter?
most people are polite. They shake your hand and introduce themselves too. But there are a lot of people that just don't do that. Right. And they just kind of like, they're kind of condescending in a way when they talk to you too. Right. And that's very troubling because if you're going to be working with that person, what's it going to be like working for them? Right. So it's very important that I try and read that right away. So then I know how I interact with them. Right. Because I'm not
How
going to,
does that change? How does that change depending on their demeanor? How do you change how you interact? I think the guys watching this would love to know.
basically, I treat everybody the same. If they're condescending to me, I don't condescend to them, but I treat them with white gloves because the whole idea behind being a renovator is that I think for most cases, because people have a hard time understanding what goes on, there are people out there that watch too much HDTV and think they know what's going on, but that's not the same. That's not the real world. I'm sorry to tell you. The real world is what I walk into. Okay. And so what I try and do is I treat everybody, it's like an education. Okay. I'm not going to be here to be a smartass or anything, but I'm going to educate you on what is proper with building codes today, what's way I do things, why I do things, the reason why the materials I use, and all those different things. If you ask those questions, I'm going to educate you on why I do that through my experiences that I've used it and through my experiences of what I've learned on the computer myself, right? Because I'm always watching things where it could always help me be stronger in what I do. Um, you know, and so that's and then at the other thing with the white glove thing is that the client is the most important because they're the ones paying the bill. Okay, and so you have to, like, again, that's why the white glove treatment come on because you just got to handle it. You got to handle it in a way that you're not going to come across as some smart ass or whatever or jackass, whatever you want to call it.
My dad always said better than being a dumbass,
Yeah,
back in the
like
day,
I
but
mean, look,
all right,
look,
let's go back
I'm
to
just gonna use an example, Karen. Mike
yeah, yeah.
Holmes. I'm gonna use Mike Holmes as an example. I mean, everybody attached themselves to him because he showed up at their door with a pair of brown coveralls on. Was he perfect? No, and he still isn't. Okay, but that's you can't. People got to understand that. You know what I mean? And I sometimes I use that. I say, don't, even when I walk out the door and I know maybe I done closed that deal or whatever, I said, I know that you guys are going to bring in other people and get quotes and everything. That's your job. That's your job to do your diligence, right? But just don't hire the first guy that comes in here with a pair of coveralls on because that's not how you do it. You have to be comfortable with the person that you want to hire, right? So that's why it's important as a renovator or a contractor or whatever you are in this business is to get that message across in a way that they feel comfortable with you, right? Because 90%
Absolutely.
90% of the time I think that's what closes the deal because it's gut feeling.
So that's all your years and years of experience, but let's go all the way back to, how did you get your very first customer?
A lot of it was word of mouth because I started out doing stuff like when I was working for the builders, people buy a new house and let's say they moved in there and they had a dishwasher. They didn't know who to call to hook it up. I started hooking up people's dishwashers.
Wow.
So I would go to the store. I knew all the houses in that area they were, Siemens breakers, you know, 15 amp Siemens breakers. So I'd go to Home Depot. I'd buy 10 breakers, right? And back then, 10 breakers was like only $70. Go try buy a breaker now. Some of them are $100 a piece. Right?
Inflation,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
killer.
So I knew the wiring was already there because the builder pre-wired it, right? So I had that, and then we just have to, buy a dishwasher kits, the connection for the water and so on, right? So I'd buy a couple of those kits too and have it on hand. So I knew because every new homeowner coming in is going to have a dishwasher hooked up, and I offered my services, and I started out like that.
Nice.
And for some of that, actually got basement rentals. Like people wanted
Wow,
somebody
that's a big jump.
to get their basement done, right? Because I already, in some of those cases, established that trust with those clients, hooking up their dishwasher.
That's a big tip for guys watching, like, one job can lead to another job and another job and another job. So in the early days, we know it's all word of mouth, but, now that you're established, what's actually moving the needle for you? How are you getting most of your customers now?
It's still word of mouth and people finding me on Google.
Google, yeah, you got some great reviews on Google, we love that. Reputation is huge in renovations. So
Yes.
what's your secret for getting happy customers to actually leave a review? And how do you handle it when a job doesn't go perfectly, AKA unhappy customers?
Well, for the unhappy customers, I just sit there and bite the bullet because, I don't need bad reviews because they've obviously paid me. So if they've paid me, then the review shouldn't be bad, really. It just becomes a personal thing. Sort of, it's maybe I don't know. It's hard. I don't know. For me, it's hard to say. I mean, I've had a guy write a bad review for me because he knew that his deposit was non-refundable, and he still went ahead and write the review. I didn't even do any work for him. 67 days later,
That's
you don't
frustrating.
you don't cut the deal and expect what me to okay, just open my bank account when you knew that it's non-refundable. I'm sorry. That's why you have it that way because
Yeah, so having your
you have to have that protection there because you're trying to fill a pipeline. In that same period, I maybe turned down maybe 3 or 4 jobs that I could have started. So,
right,
anyways, that can be frustrating. Um, to get people to do reviews is you got to make it simple for them. Basically, um, Google came out with a thing you could put on your phone, and you could just basically put your phone in front of them, and all they got to do is hit the stars, and then it goes right to you because the link's already there, right?
yep.
Because there's a lot of guys out there, and I'm going to tell you, in fact, I know it. They're cheating. They got some of these companies that are putting reviews on their thing that are not real reviews, and that's not
Um,
helping the customer because they thinking that because Google reads the algorithms, right? How many reviews you got, da 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 da, and they always want them to be updated, and so this is what you know people can fall into that trap, right? That these kind of oh, I got to get all these. Yeah, you need to get reviews, but they have to be legit because the customer sees you. He's got to be reading true stuff, not stuff that's fake. It's not fair to
that's
him,
your
right?
brand.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
exactly.
your brand. So you mentioned, your pipeline. A lot of guys do struggle with that yo-yo effect, too much work one month and not enough the next. Do you notice that certain months are busier than others, and how do you handle that?
Not easy. I've noticed that.
Yeah.
I've noticed that since I've been involved in this, that January, February, and March seem to be the 3 months that I'm slow, and I don't like it. But that's how cyclical it's been, right? And I think a lot of that is, people spend a lot of money at Christmas and they're trying to get over that. And then, they're just trying to get over that. And then they get into February and then we got those dull days in February where, it's da 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 and kind of people's self esteem goes down. And then March sort of picks up again because all of a sudden people realize they may be getting some money back in tax time and
Ah,
being able to do some renovations and they can plan, right? Um, so these companies out there that are out there, they're trying to help contractors fill their pipelines. Of that's the pretense they're working on. They've realized that too. That's why they've created what they've created because trying to help out. But who vets the clients? They say they vet the clients. Really? To me, the guy that vets the client is the guy that gets in front of the client. That's the contractor, right? Because you're always going to have your tire kickers or whatever you want, or people that like to waste people's time. Um, you no matter what, you'll find that in all genres of life or whatever.
I agree, and I think business own or customers should, kinda get it in their mind that the planning stages is those cold months, January, February, March. That's where you should be, like,
Look,
getting deals from people like you for the renovations because they know it's the slow
look,
season, but they just seem to, like, hibernate or something.
yeah. Well, like I write in my quote right at the bottom, the rules. My quotes are good for 30 days. Okay, I'll stand behind them for 30 days. I want a deposit that holds a start date. If it doesn't start right now, I want a non-refundable deposit to hold the start date. But what's important about that, what you just said, is that let's say it's January and they don't start in January, but they want to start in April. Okay, so you give me a deposit and I hold your date in April and I'll hold the price too. Even if the price increases, I'll eat whatever the increase is, if it's 10% or whatever. Usually most
Don't the materials go up? Yeah,
and
don't the material
materials are
price
but here's the thing, materials are always going up in most companies at the 1st of January, always starting the new year off. And so that's why I always phone my guys ahead of time to see. And I'm always trying to, every time I'm in the supplies or whatever, I'm always is there any increases coming down the pipeline? And they tell me because they'll know themselves, right? And so,
Oh, I think this is important too. You mentioned in our pre-call that, that you deal with not big box suppliers. So
no.
tell us a little bit about your premium suppliers and why that's important for not only the guys listening to this, but the customers that are going to see your video. Like, why is it important that you deal with premier suppliers and not the we won't mention any names, but the big box stores?
The reason why I don't deal with the box stores is because the box stores have things that are made for them or just made for them.
And
Even if,
why does that matter? You told me why that matters, but tell
okay, I'm
everyone
going to use an
watching why.
example. If you go to Home Depot and you buy a mowing fixture, if I go to my supplier and I buy that same home mowing fixture, if I open that fixture up, there's going to be something different in that fixture from the one that's at Home Depot than my supplier.
Why?
And the reason why that's done is because Home Depot sits down with these guys and say, "Look, we want to buy your product, we want to support it, we want to put it on our shelves, but we need you to make the product so it's profitable for us." So what they'll do is Moen goes back and they sit there and
Ah,
they go, "What can I take out of this, or how I make it cheaper for them, but don't affect who we supply to our other suppliers, which is I go to a plumbing supply, right? And get the actual true mowing fixture." That's what Home Depot's
that's
does.
mind-blowing. That's mind-blowing to me as a consumer, that's mind-blowing. I would have no idea.
I didn't
I
know
would
that.
just go through the big box stores and I would just say, "Oh, the" what was the toilet brand that we were talking about? It was
Kohler,
the,
Kohler.
Kohler, I was gonna say Cohen, Kohler, and you said the same thing, and I was really surprised by that. Okay, I wanna end this on a real high note. That was a little secret gold for the consumers watching and the people that may hire you in the future. I wanted to end off on your special project that you told me about. Is there something else you wanna add before that?
Yeah, one of the best things that ever happened to me in this business was back in 2010. I was approached by a lady. I can't remember her last name, but her first name was Sarah, and she was running an organization in Oakville called Walls of Hope. And what Walls of Hope was is there was a group of people that got together that were like designers and some carpenters and contractors and da da da. And what they did was Sarah got connected through some kind of service that provided her names of people with, let's say, they had kids or family members that maybe came out of the hospital that were down and out and needed their self esteem boosted. They would go into those, get a hold of those people and go into their lives and kind of like do these like theme rooms for kids and give like a pay it forward service back to these people to bring their self esteem back up. And Debbie Travis, a designer, found out about this and did that to Sarah when she went away one weekend in Montreal, and they did this pay it forward thing to her, and it was all on CBC and everything. And they had guys walking around with tool belts on and full Monty, right, doing dancing and all this kind of. It was kind of neat. And I said to myself, I wouldn't mind doing that, but I don't think I'd do the thing with the tool belt. But anyways, make a long story short, I got a call from her one day because this other designer that I was going to connect to, we were going to do a project here in Oakville, actually, um, gave my name to her, and Sarah called me up, and it was like a 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, and she's basically crying to me on the phone. Her contractor she had that managed, she was about to go into an extreme makeover, so that meant we're going to be at least 7 days into this project. There's going to be 5 or 6 or 7 people on a leadership team, and everybody had a responsibility. And she was looking for a contractor that can manage all the volunteers. So I said, yeah, I would do it. I brought my trailer. I labeled all my tools and everything, lent my tools out and everything. I got everything back. And 7 days later, we did a walkthrough with this family that
Big
basically,
reveal.
it was like a
Yeah,
big reveal. Yeah, exactly.
like
What,
the extreme home makeover style.
yeah.
Big
And
reveal.
it was so overwhelming. And we had like people that volunteered there that helped out and everything, got to go through after we took the family through. And, we had a lot of big companies that sponsored, like Lowe's and Union Lighting and everything. And I made a lot of different people there and contacts and everything. And I actually met some people there that actually did some work for through that. Right. And I had, at that time, I was fairly busy. I had 3 jobs running. So I'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, go down to the site, make sure everything's going to be da 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 da, go check my sites out, then come back to that site and
That's a
basically
lot.
stay there till like 2 o'clock in the morning, go home, get a few hours sleep, and get up the next day and go about it again. 7 days, 7 days, and
Crazy.
I've never regretted it. It was the giving back your time and to help others out and whatever is probably the best thing you can do in your life. Because
That is amazing. I
you know,
I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. All right, I'm gonna have to call it a wrap for today. I appreciate you coming on and being real about leads and customer happiness and reviews and pipeline management. It's easy to pretend everything's perfect, but the guys listening to this need to hear the truth about the business side of this. So, where can people find you if they want to see your work? Obviously, we'll put the links below, but your main website is
Premier Renovation Services.ca.
with an S on the end of services.
Yes.
So, if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, you can email us the renoring@gmail.com, and we will see you on the next one.